Hey, Dave.
Hey, Stan.
You know, we talk about getting older.
It's one of the only things I talk about these days. I talk about getting older, and I talk to other people about them getting older as well.
It's kind of the only thing you and I have in common anymore, is that we're both getting older.
Mm-hmm.
You know what no one warned me about? Was that my body's physical integrity would get worse.
Mm-hmm.
I bruise easier.
Sure.
I've had a cut on my thumb that hasn't healed in like 2 weeks.
It gets worse.
Oh, no.
I swear I've had this looked at by a doctor, but I have a mosquito bite on my arm that has been there for like 2 years. That's just there.
Oh, no.
And I talked to a doctor once, and I don't want to recall a canceled comedian's bit, but the doctor was basically just like, this is the way you are now that you're old. You're going to have things like that just don't go away. And I was like, okay, thanks.
You know what else? Shane's never here, but Devin's not here. This is a two-hander.
It is.
So maybe the whole episode can be a cold open. I used to be a comic book guy.
Mm-hmm.
Once upon a time.
Not the metaphorical comic book guy.
No, I just liked comic books. And I got an email last week from a listserv that I was on 20 years ago that had gone dormant, and then it came back.
What?
Yeah. And they just emailed me again, and I said, sure. And I'm trying to remember which listserv it is. Oh, it's Comic Collector Live, the Comic Collector Live newsletter. Just emailed me out of nowhere. It says here that I've been a member since April 2007. So like,
wow,
this is
20 years.
That's how long I've gone without hitting the unsubscribe button. But it's because they never, ever, ever, ever email me. But I got this email, and it had the new releases for the week.
Okay.
And there was one title, a number 1 from IDW, that caught my eye.
Magic?
No.
Destroy all humans. They can't be regenerated?
No, I've tried to buy that. It's always sold out.
Okay.
I tried to buy that from the local comic shop a number of times. And I was accused by the guy, like, oh, you just want the magic card. And it's just like, what is it, Diabolic Edict? It's not a good card.
Yeah. No, we're good.
And I'm like, no, I just like reading manga about magic. But no, in this case, it's called Godzilla Heist 1.
I love it.
Which I thought was an interesting title.
I love it already.
So I looked up some reviews. The reviews were very promising. They described it as Ocean's 11 in a Godzilla universe.
Okay. Godzilla.
So I bought it.
We got it. We got it right here.
So I bought it. Look at this cover. Isn't that cool?
I feel nothing.
Well,
I'm not a comic book guy. I never was.
So I'm leafing through it, and look at one of these advertisements in the very back.
Godzilla versus Chicago.
Yes. So maybe I'm not just a comic book guy now. Maybe I'm just going to get really into Godzilla comics.
I mean, there's lots of movies and comics. The big one, Godzilla 0. Did they do 0 and then -1?
No, they just did Godzilla -1.
Was it -1? Wasn't there a 0 too? They're just going backwards, right? Is there going to be a -2?
No, I don't know. What are you talking about? You might be talking about Shin Godzilla, which was the Japanese Godzilla movie that came out before Godzilla -1, but they're unrelated. Both very, very good, by the way.
They must be related somewhere back there.
Only in the presence of the titular Godzilla. But no, otherwise they're totally unrelated. But both very good. I mean it. You should check them both out. And you, the listener, should check them both out.
Okay. I'm cutting this way down. I hope you know.
Why?
This is 6 minutes of
directionless. There's no other content.
Yeah, no kings, just cold opens. That's what we're about here at the Dive Down Now.
Hello and welcome to episode 310 of the Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, strategies, and MagicCons for the casual spike. 17,000 casual spikes descended upon McCormick Place in Chicago, Illinois this weekend.
Some less casual than others, I would say. There were some pretty serious spikes there.
I saw a tuxedo.
You saw a tuxedo. I was mostly referring to the Pro Tour being there, which is the land of non-casual spikes.
Hold on. You think a casual spike can't qualify for the Pro Tour?
Oh, I think it can. I just think some of them are also non-casual spikes. Some of them are serious spikes. Some of them are professional spikes, perhaps.
I will even say the Pro Tour attendees probably not in the 17,000 count of attendees because they probably didn't have to buy tickets.
True.
But that is what I heard. 17,000 tickets were sold this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. Largest MagicCon ever.
Ever. And largest MagicCon there will ever be. That's what I'm saying.
Like you're calling it?
I'm calling it. It's only downhill from here.
Bring the curtain down. We're going to go to MagicCon -1 from here. Countdown.
16,999. Well, I mentioned this in the cold open. I don't know if David's going to cut it, but Devin's not here. This is a two-hander.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I have not done a two-hander in a long time.
I don't know why they won't let us. They won't let us.
Because they know it goes off the rails.
We're just talking about, what was that called again? Godzilla Heist 1?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was called.
Okay, perfect.
Issue 1.
Issue 1.
Comic book guys. We're comic book guys now.
I have nothing to say about comic books. I'm sorry. I know I got a lot of fans. I never even liked the Marvel movie that much, to be honest.
Well, nothing of value was lost there, but you've never in your, what are you, 29?
46 years?
Come on, be honest. Stop lying about your age, David. 34?
29. Yeah, 29. Looking lovely at 29.
You've never, ever read a comic book or graphic novel that you like? Not even like Watchmen?
I tried to read The Watchmen. I did not finish it. Yeah, it's true.
That's because you hate reading. Too much text? Not enough pictures?
No, I was like, I need to go back to Anna Karenina instead of reading The Watchmen.
I'm not familiar with that graphic novel.
Yeah, well, it's by a Russian, so you might hate it on principle.
Oh, no. The Soviet era Russian cartoonists, they understood how bleak life was.
Yeah.
Although that may be pre-Soviet. This is going to be a fun show. This is going to be a show format that we've done, I think, maybe once in our 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly a grab bag, but it is. If anything, it's kind of a clip show.
It is a clip show, I would say, yes.
No, not a clip show of our past hilarious bits or smartest insights from deck dives of decks that have come and gone.
Those are gone. We don't even remember those.
David and I went to MagicCon Chicago this weekend.
We did.
And we got very generous press passes from Liz and Jeff, the PR team at Wizards of the Coast.
That's right.
They even paid for our parking.
Yeah, it was amazing. Don't forget Riley.
Riley paid for the parking.
True. We're eternally grateful. That's all I could say.
Truly, truly. But while we were at this MagicCon, I did not play one game of Magic. Did you play any Magic?
No, didn't have time to, unfortunately. It was a little weird because having just gone to Portland a couple of weeks ago where we played a ton of Magic, I'm a little bit recovering from that still, but also I just had a lot of other stuff that I had to do, but I still wanted to be around the MagicCon and take advantage of the excellent content that there was there to view. Mm-hmm. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about the spoiler panel that we saw on Friday where they announced details about Tarkir Dragonstorm and a few other sets after that as well. As part of that panel, we got to go to a Q&A session with Blake Rasmussen, Athena Froehlich, and also Mark Rosewater, where there were, a few of us, people of the press, of the Magic press, got to ask questions. And so we will play you some of the best excerpts of that particular panel. And then after that, Stan actually got to talk to Blake about the modern unbans that happened, trying to get a little insight about where Wizards is after the unbans and what the state of modern is a little bit. So that's a good interview that we can talk about. And then after that, on Sunday, Stan and I both attended the Mark Rosewater presentation where he went through the 20 most influential cards.
I think he would describe it as the 20 most influential card designs.
Designs, that's right. Yep.
In his opinion.
Right, in his opinion. Yeah.
About half of which were cards designed by him.
Yeah.
but not exclusively. Not exclusively cards designed by him.
Then we got to do another Q&A session after that with Mark Rosewater, where we got to talk a little bit more about lots of different things related to design, to him putting together the list. And again, we will take some of the excerpts of that Q&A session that we think are the most interesting to put here in the pod. So it's going to be a lot of Mark Rosewater this episode, actually, which is interesting.
It's about time. David, was that your first time like being in the same room as Mark or meeting him?
I think I said hi to him at a Grand Prix or something like that, or maybe Vegas way back in the day at another point, but I've never spoken to him. And I definitely got to have a couple of little conversations.
He is as advertised.
Yeah.
Just really charming, so smart, full of stories, really great insights, really generous with his storytelling.
And so passionate about Magic and game design, like unbelievably.
Yeah, hearing Mark speak, especially when you get to be in the room with him, but even when you hear him speak in VODs or interviews elsewhere, I just always walk away feeling like Magic is in good hands. And, even though sometimes on the podcast, like we have reactions to things, Magic is a big company with a lot of stakeholders and a lot of different goals and a lot of consumers that it's trying to please. And sometimes it makes decisions that we love. Sometimes it makes decisions that we don't love. But regardless of all of that past experiences, like hearing Mark talk about the game and the design process always just fills me with a lot of respect for what he does and fills me with a lot of trust that the people, at headquarters are doing things with the best intentions for the game and its longevity and the players' fun.
Yep. All right. We don't really have any housekeeping, no new patrons, no new increased tiers, no new reviews. But if you would like to support us, go to patreon.com/thedivedown to be able to give us a little bit of money, join our Discord, qualify for some swag, boxes, pins, all of those kind of things. If you would like to support us in another way without having to go through Patreon, you can go to our store at thedivedown.com/store, buy a hat, buy a shirt, something like that. Now we come to Heavy Play.
Oh, yeah.
We do have to talk about Heavy Play a little bit. So our affiliate code at Heavy Play is the Dive Down 2025. If you would like to get 10% off of your first order of some of the best gaming gear that you can get to protect your cards, to make them easy to use, to be able to attach, bundle, and carry when you're at a tournament. However, we do have some special things to talk about today when it comes to Heavy Play.
New gear incoming. Not even on the website yet, but you can see glimpses of it on their socials.
That's right. We talked a little bit about it after Portland, but we actually got to put our hands on some of the new art playmats, which have been around for a little bit, but it's the first time that I've got to try one myself. The new Equipmag giant deck boxes, the carry boxes, I believe they're called.
They're called carriers. Yeah, they're called
the carriers. Yep, the carriers. And then the new rolled up playmat carrier boxes. If you would like to stick with your beautiful dive down playmat and roll it up and put it in a nice magnetic tube.
Yeah, it's funny to call it a tube because it's not round. It's like a gold bar.
Yes, gold bar shaped thing to put your rolled up playmat in.
And what I love about it is that you can still magnetically attach your deck box and dice tray to it.
Yes.
So it's still part of the system. The system of magnets are alive and well.
It all goes together like some kind of great deck gear Voltron that you can configure in whatever way you want. So if you want to check that out, go to heavyplay.com. The Dive Down 2025 is the code to use.
Okay, so we got a lot of great content at MagicCon. I think the biggest news item, other than the results of the Pro Tour itself, is the spoiler panel. That's what makes MagicCon so special. You get to see a lot of new cards. You get to see some mechanics. You hear about the lore. You see a ton of art. They even ended with an announcement of what the final UB set of the year is. Avatar: The Last Airbender. But the coolest thing about it was immediately after that spoiler panel, Blake, Athena, and Mark walked into the press room. They sat on a table in front of us. I put some microphones before them. I clipped a microphone to myself. Mm-hmm. David sat next to me. and we recorded some questions and some answers.
Yeah. Now, before we get into that, let's real quickly talk about what some of the spoilers were. So, Tarkir Dragonstorm, it's the return to a beloved plane. Stan, are you excited to go back to Tarkir? Do you have a special affection for cons and all that stuff, or what do you think?
I do have only fond feelings toward cons. When I first got into standard, cons was certainly looming large in the standard format at that time. I never drafted it other than like a handful of drafts with you years later. Dragons are cool.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a draft format so good that you and our extended play group in Chicago gave me some boxes for my 40th birthday 6 years ago of cons. And I still have one of the boxes here that I'm saving for a rainy day to draft. And who knows, maybe we'll have to draft it with the new set or something like that. Probably not. I'm sure the new set's a banger too. Yeah, I have a lot of fond memories of Cons of Tarkir for sure. It was when Shane was starting to get into Magic. And this was the set that he was really into. We did play a lot of standard. The fetch lands being in here helped a lot of people get into modern. It really changed modern because all of a sudden before we only had 5 fetch lands and now we had a complete cycle. Like there were like 5 years of modern that only had the enemy fetches.
The cool thing about cons at the time for me was even though I was getting back into Magic during Theros block, so before cons, it was cons block where I was first introduced with a wedge and really a play style that just resonated with me and captured my imagination. And it's kind of inexplicable, but there was something about Jeskai and Prowess that I thought was so cool and fun. And it was the first time I was having fun casting non-creature spells for value or just to perform game actions, and would get rewarded for it. And in a way, that's kind of why cons probably holds a place in my heart, because I got to not only live it, but like it revealed something to me about my MTG preferences.
Yeah, I believe that too. It reinforced them for me. I was kind of like, I already knew that I like red, white, and blue the best, basically. But yeah. So let's talk a little bit about spoilers really quickly.
Sure.
There's dragons, there's new guild leaders, there's all these kind of things that are. So there's 5 new spirit dragons that come and take over, just that kill the old dragon lords and like help new cons take over and let the cons come back. So we're back to like the wedge clan based version of Cons of Tarkir. So it's not like where we left off on Dragons of Tarkir. It's like what's happened after that. Mm-hmm. That's the story.
Great story, by the way.
So you're going to see it. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go super deep into it. First off, the spoiler panel itself, the big like in an auditorium, was very interesting because last year all of these panels were on the convention floor.
Yes.
And this year they had them in the Airy Crown Theater, and it was like going to a full-on like presentation with like smoke and lights and like music blasting and like, I mean, it was like much more of an event, it felt like, for these things.
The panelists entered the stage by walking through the mouth of a dragon.
Yeah.
Exactly. Through smoke machine smoke.
Yeah.
It was pretty epic.
Yeah, it was great. That production value part of it was great. The panel of people that they had up there that included Mark Rosewater, Blake again, Athena, and then Forrest and Sarah, who were 2 of the art directors.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it was great. You could sense the enthusiasm they had. It went through the whole presentation. Not going to spend a ton of time on this, but the one card that they did spoil that was super interesting to me right away was a new Mox Jasper, which says add 1 mana of any color, activate only if you control a dragon.
Heck yeah.
Yes. I did say on our Mox Opal episode that we were just about due for another Mox. Believe it or not. And here we are.
Well, you're only able to say stuff like that because you have that board in your house that's like, we've gone 474 days since the reveal of a new Mox, and every day you add a number, and then finally last Friday you got to turn it back to 0.
Yeah, it's been 6 years or 7 years since Mox Amber, and here we are. I'm not counting Tantalite. We're not counting Tantalite. The other one deck that was card that was of course funny is Storm Scale Scion, which has Storm on it, which they said they probably would never print back into Standard, and that's the inspiration for the Storm Scale itself. And now we have a card called the Storm Scale Scion, which is pretty funny. Anyway, Tarkir looks cool. After that, we talked for a long time about Edge of Eternity.
That's right.
The sci-fi sets. And I got to say, there's not a lot to talk about that other than they showed pictures and they talked a little bit about the vibe of the set and about how it's going to be sci-fi as Magic would do it.
Yeah.
The art looks incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. They talked for a long time about Edge of Eternities without showing a single card.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really impressive in building hype that way, strictly through the images. And like seeing the art for a Space Kabu was really exciting even.
Yes.
And, there's this hint of, God, they had a name for it. It looks like a supernova, but they called it like something else.
The Void, I think they called it.
A super void, actually.
Super Void, yeah.
And they describe how, unlike our universal supernovas, in the rings of a super void, organisms can live and survive. And they hinted at what that would be, that some people might know what that is. I'm guessing it's Eldrazi, so maybe we'll get some Eldrazi in the set too.
Whoa, I didn't see that, but interesting.
Since the Eldrazi are from the Blind Eternities, and this has Eternity in the name, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm reading the tea leaves, but it was fun just to kind of like look at the bigness of Magic through the lens of a single set, and still just through the lens of like, I don't know, a dozen pieces of art that they presented, maybe a little more than that.
Yeah, go look at the art. It's worth it. Honestly, I'm not really a skeptic about these theme things. I'm totally fine with this weird, era of Magic that we're in, where we're trying all these different genres. I personally think it's cool and interesting. But in particular, I think the art that we've seen so far is very high quality and looks like a cool new era for Magic to test out. Okay, so we're gonna roll tapes on the Q&A session that we had afterwards, where we talk about things like what's going on in Tarkir, where we talk about the way that they decide whether to do, universes beyond sets and other things like that. There's a lot of interesting questions in here.
Yeah. And I would say, just as a warning for all of our tapes, is that when we record these, the microphone of our interview subjects is on a table, and these passionate people love banging that table when they're making a point.
Yes.
So it sounds fine, but if you hear odd percussion, that's just someone being effusive and banging their fist on the table as they're saying something. But it's okay. It's a great interview, and let's listen to it now.
Yeah. So I did so I was the lead for the original Tarkir 10 years ago. It was really important. Like, one of the things when we do a return, we understand that like people love the reason we're returning to it is they love the things the first time around, and that people want to take that and mix it with the new things. And so whenever we do any sort of faction and such, and we did this with the clans, it's very important. Like, this is not just true of Tarkir. When we go back to Ravnica or anything that's sort of faction-based thing, we in fact think about, okay, what did it do before? What did it mean? And while we made new mechanics, we stuck very, like, Mardu is the fast, they're the aggressive. They're still the aggressive guy. We didn't change that. Nothing about what we did changed the essence of who they were. We gave them new tools and some new toys, but it's very important that if you take the ones from the current set and play the ones of the old set, that they do blend together. And that was a very conscious, very important thing. It's something we normally do, but we especially did with the clans.
I will say, with any return to set, you're trying to strike that balance of, this is something that people are really familiar with, they've come to love it, so you really want to deliver on those expectations, especially nostalgic expectations, which sometimes are hard to meet, while also keeping it really fresh and exciting and new. So when you come to it, it's not like, oh, I've seen this before, I can skip it. It's something that instead you get to see and you go, wow, I can't believe they've done that.
And the trick we've learned, this is the trick of doing returns, is some of what you did worked great and some of it didn't. Redo the stuff that worked great, remake and make new things and replace the stuff that didn't. And that's kind of the recipe of a return.
Was it a hard decision to let Morph stay on the sidelines for this one, or? The
reason Morph stayed on the sides is we were jam-packing two different things in the set. We just had no room. Like we have 5 clans and we have clan stuff, and we have dragons, we have dragon stuff. They just filled all the space. And there was the reason we put the reason I put Morph in originally was we were showing the evolution of the time change, and so it got to be Morph, and it was Manifest, and it was Megamorph. Like we're using it to represent something. All that wasn't here anymore, and so Morph wasn't about the clans. Morph wasn't about the dragons. Well, this set's about the clans and the dragons, so there just wasn't a space for it. And we have to remove old stuff to put new stuff, and so that just was the perfect example of, hey, it didn't really fit what the new thing was about, and nothing. I love Morph. Morph's a great mechanic, but it didn't fit what this set was, so we took it out.
Does it change or make it more difficult when you're designing a new set to play well with a set from 10 years ago in terms of the clan's mechanics?
In some ways, I find it easier, actually, because I know the parameters of what I'm doing. When you make a brand new set and there's no rules, we've never done anything before, that's a lot harder because you have to figure out what you're doing. When you do a return, one of the nice things about return is I have a lot of things that I know. Like, we're doing clans, we're doing dragons. Like that speaks about a lot. A lot of the structure of the set is, how do we make clans and dragons work? We have to solve that problem, but at least it's a defined, known problem. Where a lot of times doing a new set, it's like, okay, what exactly are we doing? And they're both, I mean, I enjoy both, but I think new sets are a lot harder to do than return.
Something that wasn't discussed today were lands.
Yes.
And lands were really important to the original cons.
I guarantee you lands are important here too.
Okay.
I mean, we're not getting into the specifics, but I will say this: it's a 3-color environment. We as we've learned over the years, you have to go support a 3-color environment. So, I mean, I can't tell you the specifics of what we did, but there's no way to do a 3-color environment without lands playing a big role because you have to support it. You have to support it limited, you have to support it constructed, and so once again, not saying what we did, land fans will not be unhappy.
Yeah, I think fans are going to be extremely excited about what we have in store.
You talked about the challenges of a new set. Edge of Eternities came out, kind of broke cover late last year. Folks seemed a little lukewarm on it. The sentiment was a little more subdued. People seem very into it today, though. You showed a lot more. You showed a lot different. How did you present EOE differently today? What was important for you to show after that initial blush?
I think we are very careful to listen to the audience, right? The audience, like, we put stuff out and they give us feedback. And there's a very strong piece of feedback, which is world building is really important to the audience. And in the last year, for example, the big hit of the last year was Bloomborough. And Bloomborough has this influence. It's not like Bloomborough wasn't influenced by pop culture things and genre. Of course it was, but we did a really good job of just making this world that felt like real and lived in. And one of the things that we wanted to do was, look, we're going to a new genre. We're mixing with space adventure, but we still wanted to do what Magic does best. And we wanted to show that off because one of the cool things about Edge of Eternities is it is an amazing world. I mean, really in-depth, really cool things. And we wanted to make sure the audience, that's why we did so much art. We did more art than we've ever done, is we wanted to show them, look, we did this with great care. And it's not just random. It is a magic. Magic goes to space. It is very much us doing not how anybody would do space. It's how we would do space. And we just wanted to show off the lovingness of the world because the players were like, we want more of that. I'm like, no, we have this in space. We're going to show this to you. And so, Edge of Eternities is it's really cool in how it feels magic-y and it's imbued through the color pie, and there's a lot of races you'll recognize from Magic, and there's a lot of fantasy in it. But it clearly also is space. There's spaceships and alien races and planets, and it has the scale and scope. I think it's a nice blending of those two. And I think as we learned more what the audience wants, we've been better delivering and showing them what they want to see so they can understand what the world is.
And with our fans, always, the proof is in the pudding. Like our team is really talented, and they deliver set after set, but there's always this, okay, space. So what? Show me how cool it's going to be. And it's always fun to get that opportunity to show off the work of the artists, the world building team, because the proof really is in the pudding for all of these. And they're really beautiful sets.
I just want to follow up to Charlie's question. So you had talked about wanting to do Magic in space for a long time. Yeah. Was the crystallization of that idea now, was it kind of we have some mechanics that we're starting to work on, and this feels like space, or like, how does that work, or is it like now we're going to do space and let's figure it out? Like
the impetus of it, to be honest, was the success of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty.
Okay, yeah.
So one of the things Magic has done from the very beginning, you go back to Magic's roots, back to Alpha and whatever. Like we were very as high fantasy as you got. That's where we started. Very Tolkien, D&D, like very very high fantasy. And one of the things we've learned over the years is where Magic kind of shines is, hey, we can keep reinventing ourselves. We have we have a multiverse. We have all these different worlds, and we really started pushing. And for example, when we went to Innistrad for the first time, like, okay, we're gonna mix fantasy with horror. Mm-hmm. That was kind of controversial. I mean, it sounds silly now, but it was controversial at the time. And so one of the things that we did with Kamigawa was we were experimenting a little bit, and we pushed a little more technology than we ever had. Yeah. And that went over like gangbusters. People really loved it. And it sort of said, you know what? Let's embrace. Let's do a little bit more with sort of technology. Yeah. Now, once again, it's Magic. The technology is Magic based. We're doing our version, but we were very, very empowered by the success of Neon Dynasty to push a little bit more in that direction. That's really what that pushed us.
Certainly, like as a player and fan, when that set came out, I was like, oh wow, they like took it to a new place.
Yeah.
I wasn't skeptical at the time, but I was like, this is really cool and it's interesting. It's really interesting that you pointed back to that moment as being where it was like that gave you permission to keep going further out, or gave you motivation to do it.
Well, and I think that Neon Dynasty is a great example that gets back to Charlie's original question, which is when we first floated the idea of, hey, going back to Kamigawa, there's going to be a lot of people suspicious about that.
Right.
Kamigawa had its fans.
It wasn't. I mean, so I have a blog. A lot of people write into me. I knew that people wanted to go back to Kamigawa, but Kamigawa was both a very bad selling set and at the time had the lowest ratings in any world we'd ever measured. Yeah. So originally what happened was we decided we're going to do a more of a pop culture Japanese sort of inspired world, and it wasn't at all going to be Kamigawa. So I said to them, well, let's not decide whether it's Kamigawa or not. Let's just build the world, and then we'll decide later whether it's Kamigawa or not. And then, like, behind the scenes, like, we purposely built this thing, like, it's old versus new, and, well, old has to be Kamigawa, right? So we sort of made it so it kind of had to be Kamigawa, and then we got people to sign off, and then it ended up being Kamigawa. But that was, just even doing Kamigawa, right, was a big challenge at the time, because it's hard to repeat things that didn't go well. That's sure. It's very easy to go back to a success. They'll sign off on that in 2 seconds. But going back to something that didn't work, that's a little more of a challenge.
Good question. Since we've looked through a lot of different sets already today at the previews, we have a return to Tarkir, and then we have also Edge of Eternity, which is brand new. How do you decide when you want to return to something versus trying to explore something new?
Okay, so I'm a part of what's called the arc planning team. And it is our job, the team is about 8 people. Our job is to look, like, we work about 3 years ahead, and we're looking 3 to 7 to 8 to 9 years ahead. And one of the things that we try to do is we want to mix. Like, one of the things about Magic is not everybody's going to love everything, right? And so one of the things we try to do when we plot things out is we want a little different thing. So we want a mix of returns and a mix of new things. We want a mix of, this is a little darker, this is a little lighter. Like there's a lot of things we try to do so that there's just a mix of different things. And the idea is in any one year, I want every Magic fan to love something. They don't all love the same thing. In fact, they probably won't all love the same thing. But like, for example, this year, hey, there's people who Tarkir, they have great fond memories of going back to Tarkir. That's the most exciting thing. There's other people who are like, oh my God, Magic going to space? They've never been to space. I love that. Or even people are like, Final Fantasy, that's my favorite game ever. I just want to see the new Final Fantasy. And so we want every year to have something people love. And by doing a variety of different things and mixing it up, we just increase the chance that, if all 6 things were the same basic thing, then we make some people super happy and others not. And so mixing it up is kind of by design. Mixing up tone, mixing up return, mixing all that up.
And also seeing how there's so many IPs. Obviously, there's less product this year, but with a wider range of IPs, and I understand that this has been a concern with players throughout the years with like, oh, you're bringing X, Y, and Z. I don't want to play with X, Y, and Z. But when it comes to standard, is there any concern when it comes to mechanically, as you said earlier, that it's easy to handle, easy to play with, but is there a concern when it comes to off-putting players in standard once you see like, oh, Final Fantasy, Spider-Man, is there any concern when it comes to that?
We did some market research because one of the questions is, okay, like we know as we enter Universes Beyond, when we got to the idea of do we want them in standard or not, because then as Blake said, there's a lot of stuff we're trying to do, a lot of different elements. We did some polling. Like we have a whole marketing research team, and basically said, okay, is it a problem for you? We asked, and what we got back was most people didn't care. I mean, not enough care that were like, there's not enough people that it made sense to like dedicate a format. I mean, we walked through that stuff. And what we generally have found, I mean, Magic on some level, it's not as if Magic's thing is about consistency. You know, like Magic is about, okay, now it's horror, and now it's little funny animals, and now now it's racing. Like we really, Magic's kind of strength is, like the metaphor I use is that we're a buffet. And that we want to make this the best buffet ever. And what we've learned is, hey, the more food, the more different kinds of food we have, the more people are happy, because just pick the food you like and you eat at our buffet. And that Magic's kind of thrived in its variety. And I mean, if you look at the 28,000 Magic cards we've made, they're all over the spectrum. And that is kind of what people have liked most about Magic. And so that's what the data says. People like the variety. And so we're trying something a little bit new. Yes, there's other IPs, and how does it feel when I'm mixing them together? Our preliminary data says people are okay with it. Hey, when the rubber hits the road, we'll get more data when people actually are playing with it. And if we get, like, we always live and die by the feedback. Like, what people want, Magic as a game, you can just look at the history of it. I mean, Commander's a great example. Commander was not a thing that existed. Then players made it. We dipped our toe in it. Players really liked it. We kept doing more, and it just became a giant part of the game. So we are reactive to whatever the audience wants. Right now, our data says they're okay with mixing and matching it. We're doing it. If it really ends up that they're not, we'll change course. But the data right now says, hey, the fun of Magic is mixing and matching lots of things.
And it's not just the sort of market research data. You can see it in play preferences as well. So when we had Universes Beyond, we kind of set aside Pioneer and Standard wouldn't have it, and we figured if people didn't want to engage with it, they would. We didn't really see that. We saw kind of all the formats grow at roughly, I don't want to say equal rates because that's not true, but we didn't see like a big exodus from Modern to Pioneer to Standard in order to get away from that. Just didn't happen and didn't materialize. And then the other thing I want to point out is that, with Standard being 3 years, there is, to Mark's point, there's so much that people can engage with what they want to. If you don't like Roomborough and you're really into horror, you can build more around Duskborn cards and build with that vibe. And the same is going to go for Universes Beyond sets or Magic sets, or there's going to be a lot for people to engage with and choose.
Just kind of building off of this whole discussion, I think a lot of people kind of feel like this is like a new era for Magic, like Foundations is a new era for Magic. What's going? I was just curious, what do you think, if you, not asking for spoilers or anything like that, what do you think are the opportunities and challenges of the next era of Magic that you're thinking, each of you are thinking about? I'd love to hear as you kind of do your work.
So the design team works 3 years ahead.
Right.
So the environment you're talking about, I've been living it for a while. Like, it's not something new to me. And so the idea of playing and I have different characters showing up and stuff, like, I've had a lot of fun. Like, it's been surprisingly fun. Like, one of the thing about Universes Beyond that's most interesting to me was we made a bunch of stuff early on, and they were things that I knew, but and then we hit the one that I have the passion for, which is Marvel. I'm a huge Marvel fan. And the first time I played Limited with Marvel, it was so much fun. Like, it like really showed me like what UB is when you find a love that somebody has and combine it with their love of Magic and put it together. It is so much fun. It is like embarrassingly fun, and that we realized that was something really powerful we had, and that kind of the funny thing is when we do the data and ask people, they're like, I don't know if Universes Beyond, except the properties I love. Yeah, do those. I like those so much, and so and the other cool thing that's interesting thing I found. I'm not an Avatar. I did never watch Avatar. I don't know Avatar, but I've done a lot of playtests in Avatar, and it's really fun in that I'm kind of like slowly learning the world of Avatar because I played so much Avatar, and like all the little hybrid animals, and there's a lot of cool things in hybrid that I didn't know because I wasn't a lover of the show, but it's interesting how you can appreciate and learn about it by being a Magic player, and that even though I'm not a fan of the property, I become a fan of sort of the set, and that's really interesting as well. Like, I've had people who have said, "Oh, we played the Doctor Who." I've never watched Doctor Who, but then I started watching Doctor Who because these were really cool, and that I'm really into it now. So there's some back and forth that's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest opportunity is acquisition. I think it is super cool what Universes Beyond is doing, just putting us in front of new audience, new fans who are maybe were interested in Magic or even were lapsed Magic players who are now getting back into the game playing. And I think one of the coolest parts about acquisition is it's not just like, oh, we got new customers, it's exciting. It's actually that allows us to build our Magic IP sets and build out our worlds to make them bigger than ever. Like MagicCon would not exist if we didn't have a bigger audience to support a festival of this size. And so as a Magic fan, I'm super excited to see us be able to tell our stories and our worlds bigger and better ways, partially through Universes Beyond.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's cheating a little bit because the 30th anniversary thing, the new era of Magic that we did at Vegas was basically my thesis on what the next era of Magic was. But I think I'm just excited for how much bigger and better Magic can be, not just as a game, but we've got the Netflix show that's really hitting its stride. We just announced the deal with Legendary. I've in the background been talking to other groups, and like Magic just has so much opportunity to do so many cool things that it's amazing to see this hobby that I and many other people started playing at a lunch table in junior high become this massive thing. And we talk about it to the point that it gets a little annoying, but the great part about Magic is the gathering, and the party's just getting so much bigger, and that is really, really cool.
Yeah, the one thing we were walking through the hall. So when the Pro Tour first started, for the first 8 years, I was very instrumental. I did all the feature matches and did a lot of coverage. And I was very instrumental in it. And I remember going to the Pro Tours back in the day, and they were, to me at the time, they seemed like this giant thing. And I was walking by the Pro Tour today, and I'm like, there's a full Pro Tour going on, and that's just one tiny thing of a giant suite of things going on. And then just the sense of scope to me really hit me. And that there's nothing less about the Pro Tour. The Pro Tour is everything the Pro Tour ever had. It's just connected to 15,000 fans loving Magic in all sorts of other ways,
I mean, this is the biggest Pro Tour that we've had, I want to say, since the pandemic, just in terms of the number. And yeah, to his point, like, the con is that much bigger. It's just, we live in a really exciting time.
Where was Spider-Man today?
I mean,
New York City.
The reality is, what we've learned is there's only so much we can throw out at once. Yeah. And if you just overload them, you can't absorb things. And so, mostly today, it's mostly Tarkir. I mean, that's the vast majority of what we're doing. We want to do a little bit of seeding because, like, the thing about Edge of Eternities is it's a brand new thing. And so we needed we didn't really talk at all about the set per se as much as the essence of what the set was to get people prepared. But we'll get that. I guarantee we'll talk about Spider-Man.
We're trying not to overwhelm people too much. I mean, MagicCons are great for, this is the exact audience who wants to hear about all the things. And so we do throw more at people than we otherwise would. But even then, we have our limits. And, we did Final Fantasy earlier this week. And so there's a lot, there's plenty for fans to grab onto right now.
Let me talk about it. I will talk about Spider-Man endlessly.
Yep.
Wow,
that was great, wasn't it?
That was so good. I'm back in McCormick, back in the basement.
Next to the granola bars, once again.
Yeah. I had like a handful of bananas. And Jeff, he saw me eating a banana, and you know what he said to me? Stan, that's your second banana. I've been counting. If you're going to put out bananas, I'm going to eat your bananas.
Yeah, that's really funny. That's your second banana. I've been counting.
Which is honestly my greatest anxiety, is that someone keeps count of how much food I put in my mouth, because I can eat a lot.
Not free food that you've taken.
Well, that too. Like, if people see how much free food I consume when it's offered to me, they would send me straight to jail.
To food jail.
As long as we're on the subject, I gotta talk about Magic Mind one last time, because what a great way to start a weekend of conventions than a quick pick-me-up that energized my body and mind, and that is Magic Mind. It's how I started every day. And conventions are so exhausting, even if you're not playing Magic. Going to the panels, talking to friends, doing interviews, chatting with the vendors as you sell them cards, chatting to vendors as you're buying cards. It took a lot out of me. And one of the ways I was able to endure without having to drink a ton of coffee or deal with like migraine consequences afterwards is by having this new energy supplement that's been shared with us on the Dive Down, which is Magic Mind. We chatted about it last week. I have found out since then that the caffeine source is matcha.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's the difference. And for those of you who've never had matcha, it's not literally a green juice. It looks green. This one tastes great. Makes me feel good. And we have a short-term sponsorship with the folks at Magic Mind that we are sharing with the listeners of the Dive Down. If you want to try out a subscription, you can use promo code DIVEDOWN, all one word, to get either 48% off your first subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase. MagicMind.com/divedown gets you where you need to go. This has been a really awesome experiment for me, trying this stuff. Tomorrow, I will get to take my last Magic Mind shot of the free samples they sent to us. And I'm really hoping our listeners use this promo code because I just want the Magic Mind folks to send me more complimentary product because I love the stuff. And I think you will too.
Well, there you go. And in between your Magic Minds, you got to speak with another Magic Mind.
That's right.
Blake.
Yeah, I mean, I asked to talk to Dan Musser, just shot in the dark. He was not at the con, but WOTC PR said, well, he can talk about it. He knows everything about the unbanned department. He always hosts the stream after BNR goes live. So he's really embedded in those conversations, as well as the feedback that we as a community share with Wizards. And even has some insights into the decision making that goes into the BNR. I think by virtue of having to communicate a lot of that stuff, Blake is just kind of like on the ground level. So oftentimes when talking to Blake or the play design team, it's always about the act of banning. And this was a unique twist, or this time we got to talk to them about like this big swing they took with unbans and what they've seen since. And I got to ask specifically about the role of Underworld Breach and its relationship to Mox Opal and how they're evaluating that. And I'm excited for our listeners to hear this as well.
Hey, Blake. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Stan. How you doing?
I'm doing so good, especially now that I'm at MagicCon Chicago. I love when MagicCon comes to my backyard.
Yeah.
I was at SUG-Con in Portland last week. 4-hour flight. I'm tall. It's hard. It takes a toll. What I really want to talk to you about today is the recent unbans in Modern that happened in December.
Mm-hmm.
We just wrapped up a 5-6-ish week mini-series where we did dives into each of those cards and the decks that are playing them and kind of our experience and how they have been impacting the format. And it's been, for me, as someone who started playing Modern post Splinter Twin, and Green Sun Zenith, for that matter, it was really exciting to kind of experience these cards for the first time outside of Cube and like in constructed decks. And I think when that announcement was made, it took a lot of people by surprise, the scale of it.
Yeah.
What can you share in terms of some of the initial things that you and the team have seen following those unbans? Since I believe in Dan's article, he had mentioned that you'll be keeping a close eye on them and how they impact the format and whether it'll be a positive or whatever.
Yeah. It's certainly an exciting time for Modern. And, even especially in the weeks immediately following the announcement, it was really exciting. You saw people trying all kinds of things, people who tried Split Twin again just to get that feeling one more time. And so we love
being able to create an exploratory sandbox where things are new, where people are excited about it, because that was really one of the constant pieces of feedback we heard leading up to the announcement, was that people just wanted something different out of Modern. Opinions differed on what different, but the general consensus was something different. And so the team knew it wanted to take a big swing to create an environment that people felt engaged in again. And certainly the initial thrust accomplished that and gave people a lot to play with. We're now seeing sort of the next step and evolution in that, which is people settling on what is working and what is not. And certainly we are seeing breach decks as one of the things that has emerged as definitely working. So I know the team is keeping an eye on that and watching the various macro archetypes, but also how those individual cards are performing.
Yeah. How do you measure success? Is
success for who?
How do you measure the success of these or unbans in general?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think anyone would acknowledge that it's inevitable that best decks emerge,
yes,
but they have to just operate within certain confines.
Mm-hmm.
Is success measured in part by having variety within a format? Is it measured by the power level of a best deck and whether or not unbans go into it? What are some of the criteria that you use to figure out, was the swing too big, or evaluating other second order repercussions that may have happened from the swing?
Mm-hmm. So there's a general broad view, which is, are people having fun? There's a lot that goes into that, which I'll get into, but that's sort of the meta question: is, are people having fun with this format? If no, what do we need to do to make it so people are having fun? Now, how do you measure fun? That I think is actually the core of your question, because there is, yes, certainly online discourse is a portion of it. We listen to our fans, we want to hear the feedback. But online discourse is not a scientific way. It's sort of a directional pointer. It's saying, hey, some portion of your audience feels this way. Some portion of your audience feels this way. Maybe you should look into that. So from there, we start digging into the data that we do have. Things like play rates. Are people playing Modern? If so, are they playing more of it? Are they playing less of it? Are they playing it because it's an RCQ format? Are they playing it because they're having fun and they want to? So we can look at that and slice the play rate data in a few different ways. Then you also look at the metagame data. What is the share of certain decks or certain cards or certain strategies? Does it feel like there's counterplay back and forth? As you said, there's always a best deck in some form or fashion, but are there options for people to attack that best deck in different ways, even if they're not as popular? So there you'll not only look at overall win rate, but you'll look at win rates against other popular archetypes. For example, in the past, we've seen formats where a deck was the quote-unquote best deck, but was just atrocious against this deck that was like played by 1% of the format. And it wasn't popular for whatever reason. It hadn't been discovered or whatnot. And sometimes the metagame will naturally correct towards that, and sometimes it won't. Or sometimes that deck that beats the best deck doesn't have a good enough win percentage against the field, and so it's never going to get high enough to actually take the top deck down. So a lot of those dynamics are what the team is looking at to see is this something that's going to naturally correct itself, or is it something that needs a nudge from another direction, whatever that nudge is. So those are kind of the main components of what people look at, but there is also an aspect of just are people specifically having fun with these cards, these strategies? And we have in the past taken action against cards that maybe didn't have the play rate or the win percentage that would have on its own gotten it banned, but people weren't having fun with it.
Yeah.
Or it was an unfun play experience, or the play pattern wasn't enjoyable. Sensei's Divining Top is kind of a classic example in that the unfun part was that it just made games take so long. The win rate was good for decks that used Sensei's Divining Top, but the play pattern of use top, look at the top 3 cards, put them back in an order, maybe crack a fetch, maybe you don't, maybe you flip. It was so fidgety.
Yeah.
And the win percentage was high enough that, and the play pattern and the number of people playing was high enough. I was like, okay, let's just let people have fun and move the game forward.
Yeah.
So
Yorion reminds me of that as well too, where it was a very good deck, maybe not the strongest deck, but games just took so long and were repetitive.
Yep, exactly. So there are a lot of things, but those are sort of the primary factors that people talk about. And then again, it's that question of, are people having fun? Yes or no? Okay. If not, why not? And then they dive into those specific reasons.
Yeah. Can you shed a little light on how does testing go into an unban decision versus a ban decision? I assume it's impossible to probably do as much stress testing as a brand new set would undergo, but yeah, can you give us a peek behind the curtain of how cards are selected and how the internal testing process helps define that?
Somewhat. So it depends to a certain extent. So let's take the most recent modern unbannings. It's 4 cards, all very powerful cards in their own right, all very different. It is very simple and something the team does to throw together a deck that didn't exist before and try it out, or try it out in an existing archetype to see if it makes it too powerful, and play a few games, see how it feels, see how we may already have a matchup grid. Well, what does it change about this particular matchup? Is that healthy? Okay. So there is that, but there is also the expectation and understanding that there is no way that a team, even though their job is to play Magic, can iterate out everything that's going to happen,
of course,
after the fact. So it becomes harder the more cards that are involved. So if we have an announcement that is just we're unbanning Ponder, and we do nothing else, that's a bit easier to test. You know where it's going to go. It's going to go in blue decks that want card selection. It's going to help some combo decks. You can test that relatively easy. With something like unbanning 4 cards that all either create or enhance archetypes that may not have existed before it takes Splinter Twin, you can build that deck and test it against some of the top decks, but then there are secondary knock-on effects. Well, what about the Mox Opal decks? What popular versions arise of that? And so on and so on. And so the second and third and fourth order effects are virtually impossible to test for. You can do some theory crafting, and the team does that. They'll hold discussions, or they'll have Teams chats where they're like, okay, if we do this, what do you all think is going to happen? Okay, and so they can test those little things. But I think Dan, in his communication, was pretty clear too that we're going to watch this and see what happens. We think this is an exciting thing to try and to let you all have some time with, and we're just going to see. Now, to some people, it might seem like, well, why don't you thoroughly test this and know exactly what's going to happen? 1, it's impossible, but 2, it's also kind of fun for people to explore those formats. One of the best experiments we ever did was
Pioneer.
Pioneer. We're launching Pioneer. We're just we're going to launch it. We're going to see what happens. Show us broken stuff. And people had so much fun with that, knowing cards were going to be banned and knowing that was the end goal. Now, you can't do that all the time. You can't just be okay, we're going to unban everything modern and retry it. That would be a mess. But for launching a new format, it was super fun. And so people do enjoy those exploratory times. Where people stop having fun is when something is there for a really long time and they can't find ways to displace it. And it's, it's stuck in the metagame, and nothing has changed that.
Yeah.
So that's also part of fun. Is how long has this thing been around and been doing well?
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a very specific question, anticipating a less specific answer. Mox Opal is unbanned. We see it used in a variety of artifact-based decks because of the text on the card.
Yes.
We see it appear in the Underworld Breach decks.
Yes.
And that deck probably takes about a month or so to really prove itself. I think there was a lot of discourse initially that even after the bans, that Boros was still putting up very consistent results, and people were like, was that still not enough? And I think now, even playing the tournaments myself, like I'm seeing like Breach and some other decks finally chip away at Boros's stronghold. But Opal's unbanned, Breach picks it up. Suddenly it seems like maybe with Opal and Breach, Underworld Breach, the card in the format at the same time, like maybe Breach is too strong and we have to reconsider if it can exist in the format. Is that a feature or a bug of the unbans, shining a light on other cards that might not belong?
I think it's a feature. Breach is a very, very powerful card.
Yeah.
It may not have been at the top of the metagame in Modern, but Opal or no Opal, that's a card that's just sitting there waiting to do something powerful, and occasionally does. Even pre-Opal, that deck existed. It wasn't as strong as it is now. I mean, you add a 0 mana Mox to a deck, and it's going to get better. Like that is expected. And it's just a question of degree. Is it too much? Is it not too much? So it certainly shines a light on that. One of the reasons that Opal was a popular choice internally to unban is because it gave lots of options. Is an affinity deck going to pop up? Is an artifact-based combo deck going to pop up or reemerge in this case? And it gave flexibility, and again, it gave people that opportunity to play around in the format and find out, which again is fun. But yeah, then the question becomes like, and I'm not saying it is, but let's say the Breach deck is too strong and the team decides to take action. Do they take action against Breach because they think it will eventually be a problem anyway? Or do they look at the effect that Mox Opal had and say, okay, this one didn't work out, let's pull it back? Those are both on the table, and there are a lot of factors to consider at that point. Again, the secondary and third effects is Opal being used in other decks that we'd like to keep around?
Yeah.
Is Breach doing anything in other decks that we'd like? The answer for Breach is no. Breach kind of does one thing. And so those are the questions that the team would ask if it got to that point.
Gotcha. Faithless Looting. I was really hurt when that card got banned. I was playing as a Phoenix a lot. It was like the first great deck that I was doing well with. And Faithless Looting got banned, and I had to start from scratch. But I learned to love Stoneforge Mystic at the time, and we move on with life.
Yep.
Since then, it's come back. But in the intervening years, it often felt like a lot of decks were looking for a Faithless Looting replacement. And people were saying like, well, let's just do Careful Study. It's like similar, but it doesn't have flashback. And you would get a lot of 2 mana effects that would loot or rummage.
There was one in MH3, and
was part of the decision to unban Faithless born out of a design challenge to like have a replacement graveyard enabler?
Part of the discussion around Faithless Looting is like we aren't seeing those kinds of decks played nearly as much as we would like to, is not the right word, but like expect to, or think would be healthy for the metagame. Having some kind of graveyard deck in a format like Modern is a feature. You want people to be playing with different zones and trying different strategies. It puts pressure in the right spaces. And to your point, none of the hypothetical replacements for Faithless Looting had quite cut it. And so I don't think, no discussion that I heard or was part of was like, oh, we haven't been able to design a card in this space, so let's just go with this. It was more, we really want these decks to have a place in the metagame. Faithless Looting can help do that, and is sitting right there, and we want to shake up the format, and we're looking strongly at unbans, and we think it's going to be relatively safe. When Faithless Looting was banned, there were some other offenders in the format that made it worse that are now gone, and so they were like, you know what, this goes in that direction, and we think it's missing the truly broken aspect, so let's try it.
Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about is the unban philosophy that I don't recall now if Dan wrote about it in the article or spoke to it in the follow-up stream, but there's some chatter about, we've heard the feedback that Modern is becoming very defined by the Horizon sets and Lord of the Rings, and some acknowledgement that there's a truth to that, and we want to give people access to like the old fun cards that they loved, and that I honestly don't remember how overt it was, but I think the sense I got after that was that there's going to be even more openness to unbanning some old fun cards in the future. Anything you can say to the philosophy around like how those decisions are made, or a potential cadence we might see to that?
Yeah. So this was a big swing for the team, and I think the idea was we've not really done anything like this. I cannot recall a BNR. There have been BNRs where lots of cards were unbanned, but they were not for these kinds of reasons. So I cannot recall an unbanning like this that was like, let's get a massive shakeup to the format. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember anything like that. And so this is sort of an experiment for them. How does this go? Do people enjoy it? Does it create new fun experiences? Does it really, did we break things? Did we not break things? Can we afford to do something like this again, or unban things again? The team has been dabbling in unbans for a while, things like the Ponder unban, for example, and sort of dipping their toes in unbans. And those generally went well. Grave Troll is an exception. Yes. There are always exceptions to the rule. But I think the experience the team had doing those small unbans gave them the confidence to say, okay, let's take this a step further and do more. And so I think what we're going to see is that the team will look at this experience, learn more from it, and iterate on future potential unbans. So the team is like, this is one thing I really love to emphasize, is they are always learning and iterating and trying to do it better next time, or different, or adapting to changes in circumstance. And so we will espouse a philosophy, and then we'll iterate on it, and we'll get better and better. And we just want to make sure people are having fun. Yeah. And however we get at that is what we're going to do.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Well, Stan, I have to say, in spite of everything and all the things I've seen Blake do over the years, and several times I've talked to him over the last few years in random times, I'm always surprised how well spoken he is about the intricacies of competitive Magic, and in Modern specifically. Like, he really pays attention. He really cares. And I thought that was a really interesting interview to hear what he had to say and kind of like what the process was.
I think Magic and Wizards, and we as a community, are very fortunate to have Blake as the director of communications, because he knows so much about the cards, the format, and the game's history.
Yeah.
We had dinner with him on Thursday night, and Dave and Blake, sitting on opposite sides of a very long table.
Yes.
We're just going back and forth, naming the most broken cards from Magic's 32-year history in alphabetical order, one at a time.
From every, we were trying to pick the most broken of every letter. Yes.
Yes. And, it's just, there's everyone who works at Wizards that I've ever encountered or that we as a community have heard from, like, clearly cares a lot. But you can tell that Blake has also just been playing Magic for 30 years and loves it dearly. And to have that as the person who gives us a peek behind the curtain into what happens in the play design, even the R&D spaces, I think we're really lucky to have someone like that compared to like a lot of other game communities that sometimes just have no dialogue with what's happening on the creative side.
Or you can tell that the PR and communication staff is separated from the people who truly understand the game. And it's very clear with these people that they care and understand and really are trying to do their best.
Yeah.
And love the game. Really love the game. You know someone else who loves the game? Mark Rosewater.
Oh, I was going to say your mama.
Yeah. She does not love Magic for the record. Yeah. For several reasons, but we can get into that another time. The Mark Rosewater had this panel. So let me say, I've never got to talk to him before, other than in passing, like I said. And this is the first time I actually got to say a couple of things to him that I've always wanted to. In particular, thanking him for his long, thoughtful history of writing about design and writing about the design of Magic in a way that I find really compelling and that I even use as inspiration in my day job, of being a creative director for corporate and branding, all the, like a totally different industry. But the way that he talks about design and the way that he thinks about structures of design and like methods to help his team be able to figure out kind of like where they're going and what they're doing are things that I use quite frequently or think about quite frequently. So imagine our delight when on the schedule for this MagicCon was this talk, the 20 most influential card designs in Magic history, according to Mark. And I have to say, if you ever have a chance to go to one of these talks, this is the only one that I've seen, but he's done, the 20 best mechanics, the 20 worst mechanics. He did 30 lessons that he'd learned about game design out for Magic's 30th anniversary. He is a really, really good speaker, and you should definitely try to go and view one of these lives if you're at a MagicCon in the future. I think it's 100% worth your time. Skip a draft.
Yeah.
Take a loss in a round, honestly, if you're playing a tournament, and go watch this, because I think it was worth it. So it was 1 hour of him going through in reverse order from 20 to 1 of the cards that he felt were the most influential designs. And like we said, his criteria were something that was super popular when it came out, and that the popularity of when it came out led R&D to do many more things like it. Do we want to read the cards quickly, or do we want to give a couple of highlights and tell people? I mean, I guess people can probably go look this up online. So,
yeah, I mean, but, it's everything from stories of how the customer service department freaked out over Force of Will and like the first cycle of free spells. It's to having to wait years and multiple sets to get Mindslaver printed because no one in the rules department could figure out how to make the notion of taking over another player's turn actually function with the rules. It's things like, a cycle of cards and how like Titans were first printed and first devised by Aaron Forsythe and have since become like one of the most critical creature types that have been like iconic, important, and powerful. And it's more than just a list of cards. It's really an hour of Mark sharing stories from the Chocolate Factory. And these are stories that involve like tons of people that we know and don't know, and like the surprising influences that eventually lead to cards appearing in booster packs. And whatever the panel that Mark is going to do at whatever convention or MagicCon or event that you attend, that's sort of the fun of it, and why I think Dave is telling you skip the draft, go to the panel, because you're just going to hear like stories from someone who's been there basically since the beginning. Even if he wasn't working at Wizards when Alpha was being printed, he's been playing Magic since Alpha was printed and was working on the Pro Tour since its inception.
Yeah, he actually is someone who managed to buy Alpha packs from a store, which is a rarity in itself, because there's not many people who got to do that even. So he's been in it the whole time.
Yeah.
There is if you want to see the list, we will link to in the show notes. There's a TCG Player live tweet. I'm sure there's others too, but this is the first one I found where at TCG Player live tweeted out, here's the 20 cards with a little bit of explanation about what Mark was saying. I don't see a video up yet. Maybe there will be one somewhere in the future, but if you want to see it, it's out there. And we won't spoil what the number one card is, but I will tell you the number one card was very, very surprising to me and very funny.
Yeah, David and I were like, is it a Mox? Like, what's it going to be? Black
Number
Lotus?
2 and number 1 are both very, very surprising, honestly.
Yeah, I wonder if these are sort of like in no particular order, the 20 most influential cards, but
yeah. All right. So after this, we got to go to another Q&A session where we got to pick Mark's brain, and us and several other people got to pick Mark's brain for a while about aspects of card design and just talk about what inspires him, what keeps him involved and excited about being a designer for Magic after 30 years of working at Magic himself. So check it out.
How fast is a new idea like that spread around the team? If somebody does discover like a new space, is there a bell that someone rings and everybody goes, "Wait, come to the break room"? You know?
I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of what most people don't realize is 99.9% of everything we make is on the floor, no one ever sees. Yeah. A lot of making, and this is probably for most design. You try a lot of different things, and most of it doesn't work, but the things that do work, you keep extrapolating off of, and so. It's hard. The reason I have my job, the reason I'm head designer is I'm really good at seeing design potential. But there's so many classic stories where, when I first pitched Hybrid Mana, I literally was so excited. I made Hybrid Mana. I'm like, oh, this is an amazing thing. This is a tool for the future. And everybody I showed it to said, eh. So, and I mean, now it's this staple, this staple core tool that we use. And I could see that, but that's the way my brain works. There's no striking against my coworkers or anything. Just I'm really, really good at seeing the unseen. And it's kind of why I have the job I have, because my job is okay, make something we haven't made before. And so I'm very, very good at that. And so I think a lot of things that are new, it sometimes takes time. Sometimes you have to see the audience react to it. And there's a lot of things that we do that, I mean, obviously we have faith in them, we put them out. But double-faced cards is another example. There are people who are still in the building at Wizards who said to me, we should not make double-faced cards. You are crossing a Rubicon you should not cross. Much like my story with the pitch cards. And it's very funny. I talk about part of my job as being head designer is rolling the boulder up the hill. There's a Sisyphus quality to it of hey, I'm doing something we've never done. And there's a whole team of, should we do that? You know what I'm saying? I have to sort of get through all the people that are maybe this isn't a good idea. And there are bad ideas or the things we shouldn't do. And so there's a lot of very classic things we've done that go on to be really famous things that I had to fight tooth and nail to get them done because, hey, there's a gauntlet. And I think that's good. I'm not actually complaining. The gauntlet being there is good. That I need to prove my ideas so that they're good ideas. But it's really funny looking back of, right, there's things that have gone on to be wild successes, and I had to fight tooth and nail. No, really, we should do this. And that at times, can get frustrating, but that is my job to keep sort of finding the new things. And then we have a super, super talented group of designers, and that's when we keep getting new blood in, and so we're always finding new things. I mean, there's things that got away that I didn't find a place to do them. For example, I made original Mirrodin, and I just put too much in it. And so Bill Rose at the time was the head designer. He's now our VP. And he said to me, Mark, there's too much. You got to take something out. So I took out energy. I thought it was cool, but okay, it was the one thing I could take out the set worked without it. And then I spent 13 years trying to find a place to put energy. I thought energy was cool. And eventually, 13 years in. So most of the things that I really liked that failed, or not failed, didn't get in, I just didn't find a place to do them later. And like energy, it took 13 years to get it in, but I eventually found a place for it. So there's not a lot that I thought should, like, we make, on my blog or, my podcast, one of the things I say is magic is a hungry monster, meaning we have to make so much content. If you have a good idea, like, we're going to use the good idea. Like, there'll come a point where, okay, let's try this idea. So there really isn't anything I like that I put it in my back pocket and just wait for the right place to use it. So it's more of, okay, it's a good idea. I got to find the right place for it. Sometimes I think it's a good idea, and then when the rubber hits the road, it's not a good idea. It doesn't play well. And then usually it's like, oh, it doesn't play well. Like, I grandiose ideas, but when you actually play, it's like, oh, it doesn't play well. And then there's really no saving that most of the time.
Is there a place where those ideas live? Is there like a Word doc of ideas? Or...
So we keep talking about making a Word doc, but what we found is it's just impractical because we make so much content that doesn't get used that it's just impractical. Right. I mean, we could say, okay, as an example, I have a blog. And so I started the blog about 10 years ago, and I've answered, I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of questions in my 10 years. And there's like 10,000 pages on my blog. So like I said to you, oh, hey, go look at my blog. There's some cool content there. It's 10,000, like, it's impractical, you know what I'm saying? And collecting the ideas has that same problem. So really, it's like in my head, like I have a really good memory of stuff we've done because I'm well aware of it. When I became head designer, so back in 2003, I became head designer, my rule was I just want to be in all the design teams just so I'm there. I'm not running them all, but I just want to be there so that I need to see everything. So, and nowadays I'm on all the Magic IP ones, and I'm on some of the Universes Beyond, but we stretch beyond my capability to be on all the teams. But I'm on all the Magic ones because those are a little bit harder. I mean, the UB ones we have to match the world, but it's an existing thing. Where the UB ones we have to make the world, so that's a little more challenging. So that's what I tend to be on. I've lost the question. Review the question.
Oh, you were talking about how you manage finding the ideas that you were asking about, the ones that didn't.
Oh, so yeah. So what happened is I'm the repository. My brain basically is the repository. So normally when we're in, I do all the exploratory meetings. So like we come up with an idea, I go, oh yeah. Okay, so we did this, now back in such and such, we tried this, and I'm very good at pulling out old ideas that we tried. And a lot of things, like Battles is a good example. Battles were a new card type from March of the Machine. So Richard Garfield, when we made original Ravnica, made a mechanic called Structures. And then when we were making Planeswalkers, I ripped off Structures to make Planeswalkers. And then the earliest version of Planeswalkers, they just did something in set order. Like Garrick, first turn, he makes a 3/3 beast. And then second turn, he doubles all beasts. And third turn, all beasts get +3/+3 and trample. But the problem was, turn 1, you play a beast, your opponent bolts it. And then turn 2, he doesn't do anything, basically. Turn 3, he doesn't do anything. He felt stupid. So we ended up changing that to the current system, Planeswalkers. But then I'm in Dominaria, and we're trying to figure out like how to do a mechanic based around stories, which ended up becoming sagas. And like, oh, well, this thing we threw away because it didn't feel right for Planeswalkers. Well, you know what? A story has a beginning, middle, and end. It feels right for that. And so we reused that, and we put it there. So like, and then we took part of what Structures was to make Battles. Like everything is sort of, we strip for parts things that don't work in the past. And so there's a lot of that.
There's also the part of iterating old card designs to make them work better, like the Word of Command turning into Mindslaver eventually.
Yes.
When does that go wrong? Where you try to make something better from the past and you push
Tinker.
it too hard?
So one time I asked R&D, I said, okay, I've made a lot of cards. Here's my card. Here's my most broken card. What's the most broken card I ever made? Because I during Mirrored, I passed Richard Garfield. I had more banned cards than any other designer. And to Richard's defense, he only made 2 sets. So I made a lot more sets. And what happened was they picked Tinker. So Tinker's a card. There's a card in Antiquities. What was it called? There's artifact in the name. What is it? Oh, Transmute Artifact. Yeah. So it turned an artifact to another artifact. I love that card. And I just played it instantly. So I was just trying to make a clean version of the card. That's all I was trying to do. I'm like, because the way with transmute, you can only get this one bigger than it or whatever. I'm like, just make the clean version of the card. And that was a mistake. There was a reason that it did that. So we constantly make mistakes, and we ban cards and stuff. But you learn your lessons. At least, I like to think I make new mistakes rather than the same old mistakes.
I have another follow-up on the Mindslaver story specifically. Yeah. You talk about how the rules managers had to be very involved in figuring out the final design of that card.
Yeah.
You still take credit for the design of that card.
Yes.
Where's the line for the individual designer in the iterative process that goes from a kernel of an idea to what ends up in a booster pack?
I mean, to be fair, most card designs have many hands. It's not like I, in a vacuum, made Mindslaver. I came up with the concept of it. And I mean, like, game control target player was mine. But, making it work, there was people that spent a lot of time and energy making it work. And the evidence that they didn't work the first time was it was hard to make work. And so, and there are a lot of cards that go through lots of steps. Like, there's some cards, one of the reasons it's hard sometimes to find who the designer was is, 5 different people kind of did it because it went through different parts at different times. I'm sorry, I keep answering, then I get off my track of the question.
It was just, where's the line between the kernel of an idea and the cardboard that ends up in a booster pack in terms of who gets the credit for the design?
And again, there's a reason. I mean, we give credit to the artist because we know who the artist is, and that's the artist. We don't give designer credit on cards, and part of that is it would not lead to a great process. The cards are a group of lots of people making, and a lot of cards are not. A lot of cards are not one person. The reason that a lot of the ones in my talk was usually if someone doing something big and different, and those are more likely someone spearheaded this big different idea. That's less, the committee much less makes the thing you've never seen before and more makes the better version of something you've seen. And that's why a lot of these are like, well, somebody said, game control target player. Even though other people might have worked to make it work, the bold idea was mine. I'm like, here's something we've never done before. It was like this clever solution to a problem.
How often does the rules manager have to get involved in a design?
Oh, all the time. I mean, anytime I do something, I know what I mostly know what we can and can't do just because I've done it long enough. I kind of know when I'm messing in space that is unknown space. So then I'll go talk to the rules manager, and the rules manager say one of 3 things is true. Number one is we can do it. The rules can handle it. I mean, the rules might not officially say you can do it, but it's easy to fix the rules to do that. One of them is we can't do that. Here's another uncard for you. Go make this card. The rules cannot handle that. And then there's the middle ground, which happens a bunch of time, which is I don't know if we can do that. We have to go look and investigate, and we're not sure. And a lot of times we'll come back, and it's not just can the rules handle it, can digital handle it, can organized play handle it, can templating handle it. There's lots and lots of different things that matter. Can translation handle it? There's lots of different factors. And so, but one of the earliest things I do when we come up with a cool mechanic is let's go talk to the rules. Does it work in the rules? That's not the only, we can get stopped by templating and stuff, but that's the first thing. It doesn't work in the rules. I think we have a good handle when we're doing something we haven't done before. For example, I told the story about Force of Will. Right. Everybody knew that cycle was the thing. Everybody, especially we knew Force of Will was the thing. It wasn't like we were unaware of what would draw people's attention. Everybody who makes Magic is a fan of Magic, and we've been playing Magic forever. And we know when we're doing something we haven't done before. And we know where the audience's eye is going to go. I mean, a lot of our job is we want to draw the audience's eye. So we know what cards are for example, it wasn't a mistake. We just previewed for Final Fantasy the cactus, the plus 99,000. So my point is, we knew what we were doing. We previewed that card because we knew it's going to make people talk, right? Because it is us being very bold in a certain area. We just don't do numbers that big, And so we know what we're doing. We have enough experience that we know when to make something that's going to pull attention to people. Are there things that got some where I get caught is something that we've done before, and somehow just one of my running jokes is I'm on my blog every day and I reveal things every day. I say things every time, and every once in a while I say something I've said 20 times, and there's a Reddit post and people are all excited. I'm like, I said this 20 times. This is not a brand, but somebody heard it for the first time that day, and. There definitely are cards where it's just I don't see something because some aspect of it get people excited, or the most common thing is the players use it in a way that we didn't anticipate. For example, this is an old example, but I made a card in Tempest or something where it said during combat you can't do anything. And the idea was I don't want instants or sorcery. The idea is It's an enchantment that says, in combat, you're going to fight. Nothing else is going to happen. You can't, no instants or sources are going to interact. And that was my intent, right? I want you to have honest fights. And it ended up being the sideboard card against Circles of Protection. Like that's how it got used, right? It's like, oh, well, it ended up being this like tool to shut down this sliver problem. And so, and that's cool. Like I never get mad that people find other ways to use our cards, but that's when we sort of get surprised that they just use it in a way that I didn't think they'd use it.
Can I ask you a little historical question? Sure. So we did an interview with Dr. Garfield a couple of months ago.
Okay,
where we talked about Multnomah Falls as being, you know, about this story.
Yes.
On a hike and had this insight.
Yes,
and the insight that really made him excited about Magic at that phase in the design was him realizing not everybody had to have the same deck.
Oh, yes.
Like a fundamental part of it that nobody had tried before. Is there a moment that you remember from the beginning of when you started working at Wizards, or even before you started working there, that you realized that kind of drives part of your passion for the design for the game?
Yeah, so I tell the story in the talk how I used to open one pack a day when I had that. Yeah. And one of them that really hit me was Berserk. But another one that really got to me was I opened up Thicket Basilisk. So it basically does touch. I mean, it was written out at the time, and early Magic had a lot of exceptions. Like it doesn't kill walls, but basically it was the first version of Death Touch, and I'd never seen that before. And basically, it's like it kills every creature, and I was just like, it kills every. It just blew my mind. It kills every. How do you fight it? It kills every creature. And it really, like, one of the things that excited me about Magic early on was this idea that you didn't know what the rules were on some level. Like, I mean, you, the consumer, like Magic breaks its own rules. And every time you think there's a rule that can't be broken, I mean, like I said, pitch cards are just such a beautiful example of this. Is, oh, I've learned if my opponent's tapped out, there's nothing he can do. I'm like, well, what if there was something he can do? You know, and that a lot of fun design is figuring out. Now, not every, like Odyssey was a set where there's a thing called card advantage, which has to do with like, and I said, what if we turn card advantage on its ear? And I made a set where card advantage was, you know, it was good to throw away your cards, and that didn't actually lead to fun gameplay. We have to be careful that when we're designing things, that the role of a designer is not to test the designer. The role is to do something that's fun for the end user, and that we have to be careful not to do things for the sake of doing them. So I like pushing boundaries, but because we think it's going to lead to something that players enjoy, not because well, let's see if we can do it. You know, players pitch stuff like that all the time. Hey, could you make a set with nothing but one drops? I'm like, it wouldn't be fun.
Your story about Shocklands, you talk about coming up with the cycle.
Yeah.
The set designer for Ravnica didn't want them at first, then came back.
Yeah. So one of the ways that Magic has been set up, has always been this way, is we like having a process where different eyes are on it. Because the idea is, one of the dangers of any creative thing is, you know, you fall in love with your babies, right? It's very hard that things mean to you, and that, but getting a separate different eyes that don't have that attachment could be a little more honest about things. And so that's why we have an early part of design and a later part of design. And with very, very few exceptions, usually someone different is running that. I'm sorry, I'm just losing track of things.
No, I didn't even get to the question, so I'm glad you just took it and ran with it. But in that story, it almost sounded like you created the Shocklands in a vacuum and then pitched it to set design. Was it part of Ravnica design? Or
no.
Is there a mechanism where on the drive to work, you have this aha moment and you're like, hey, where can people use this idea?
So the way vision design works is we make a set. But the set is what we call proof of concept, meaning instead of explaining to you what we think a magic set, we'll make a magic set and it'll demonstrate what we're doing. But our set isn't there to be exactly what you're going to print. It's just us showing you what we're thinking. Now, some of those cards will make it to print. Usually 10 to 20% maybe will actually make it to print. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Like the more top down you are, the more that make it. But the idea is it just shows you what things could be. And then the set design, the metaphor I use in making Magic is we're building a house. And we have 4 parts of design. We have exploratory design, we have vision design, we have set design, we have play design. Exploratory design is you're just doing research on the house. Where could you build a house? What type of houses are there new building materials? Like you're just doing research on house building and location, stuff like that. Vision design is the blueprints. Like you're making a house, but you're not building the house, but you're planning and plotting the house, and you hand over blueprints. And the set design, they're building a house. They're actually making the house. And hey, when the rubber hits the road, like maybe you put a wall here, but it doesn't work, and they got to move the wall. Like they actually have to make the house, and that the practicality of making the house makes them make changes. And then maybe something, they can rip things out. They do what they need to do, but it's based on the blueprints they're making them. And then set design is kind of like interior decorating. Like they're the finishing touches. They want to make sure that everything is as beautiful as it can be. And there's a lot of fine tuning to make the final thing. So we hand over a file. There's things in the file. I handed over, we knew we needed dual lands. So I basically in the file was like, well, you need dual lands. Here's our recommendation for the dual lands. Here's what we think. And I thought they were good. Like I expected them to use them. I thought they were good dual lands. I was very proud of them. So when Brian took them out right away, in fact, the funny story is Aaron and I, we did a couple MagicCons ago. We were on stage talking about Ravnica because we were celebrating the anniversary of Ravnica, and we were talking about the influence of Ravnica. And so in the talk, I talked about making the lands. And Aaron goes, "You didn't make the lands." I go, "No, Aaron, we made the lands." And he goes, No. We went through like 20 different lands. So I had my old files. I pulled up my old file. I go, "Here's the handoff." He goes, "Oh, you guys did make some lands." And it's like I said, because Aaron's memories, they tried 8,000 things before they got to dual lands. And he just didn't realize that I turned them over and Brian said no. So that was a funny story. So, but yeah, a lot. And once again, it's not a strike against Brian. I mean, whenever we talk about this, Brian was just doing due diligence. And hey, he did come back and say, you know what? These are the right thing. We tried a lot of other things. They didn't work. I came around that this was the right thing. And so to his credit, hey, they're in the set. It's not like he didn't put them in the set. They're in the set. He also took out Hybrid Man. But he put it back in. He took out the Hybrid Man. He took out the lands. But both of them got put back in. So
you told an interesting story on Friday after the preview panel about Neon Dynasty being made after the negative reception to original Kamigawa.
Yeah.
Did you have to think about why original Kamigawa failed?
Oh, yeah.
And flip the script to make Neon Dynasty work?
Well, I think, so basically what happens whenever we do a return to, the very first thing we do in the very first meeting is we write everything on the board we did. And like what worked and what do we want to bring back? And Kamigawa was like, not that, not that, not that, not that, not that, not that. In fact, when we went back, we were like we ended up using a mechanical channel, which is, it's just kind of a boring mechanic. Like I wouldn't have ever made it because it's why label it. But we brought channel back because like Slim Pickens, ninjutsu and channel were kind of it. So we do, like whenever we go back, we're like, what are our failures and what are our successes? And that, right, we are always learning from that. Like every time we do a set, we have what we call post-mortem. And we say to ourselves, what do we do right? What do we do wrong? And we try to learn from the lessons from every set we did. Kamigawa was interesting because like we didn't even start saying we're doing Kamigawa. What happened was we said, okay, we're going to do a pop culture Japanese world. And then originally, and we'll make it a brand new world. Now, on my blog, I knew all these people have been asking for Kamigawa to come back. So I said, whoa. Let's not decide yet whether it's Kamigawa or not. Let me make a cool set, because I led that set. Let me make a cool set, and hey, halfway into it, we'll talk about whether or not it's Kamigawa. And then secretly, I designed it so it had to be Kamigawa. So I made a whole theme of past, like present versus the past and stuff. And like, well, the present was this new thing, but the past was what it was before. So we wove in, I mean, a lot of where it ended up being was, how do we sort of make a cool thing that's new and old at the same time?
What did Neon Dynasty do that made it more successful than original Kamigawa?
We are much better designers than we were back then. I mean, Kamigawa made a lot of classic mistakes. Like it was the first top-down set we ever really did. We said our first top-down block. Like Bill Rose was the head designer because I want to do top-down block. We picked Japanese mythology, and then he said we're going to build the world first and then make cards second. And it turns out that flavor is way, way more flexible than card mechanics. And so the set was what we call ham-fisted. Like, okay, every samurai has the same ability. Okay, every ninja has the same. Like it had a lot of problems in the way it was built. We later learned how to build top-down sets better. Like when I made Innistrad, I tried a very different approach where there's a back and forth between the creative team, and that became the standard of how we do top-down sets. So like part of it is like, okay, well, we made that mistake back then, but we know better now. So let's design like, so when we were doing Japanese pop culture, we used the modern style of how we do that, not sort of how we did it before. And a lot of it is also there. I mean, I talk about iteration, like we've tried different things and we learned things. And so I can look at mistakes I made before and I said, oh, well, now that I know A, B, and C, I think I could do it differently. Another good example, there's a mechanic called Chroma that was in a set called Eventide. Aaron had made one card. I said, this is a whole mechanic. I didn't put it in the set. Like, we're going to save it. This is a whole mechanic. And then I ended up putting in a set called Eventide, and it flopped. And it really gnawed at me because I'm like, I like in my heart, like I'm good at seeing potential, right? I'm like, wow, I really thought this was going to be a big thing. And so years later, we were making Theros, which is the Greek mythology set, and we're like, well, what if we brought it back but we changed it around? What if we gave it a better flavor? What if we were more narrow in how we made Devotion a giant hit, right? So like, it wasn't even that Chroma was a bad idea, it was a bad execution. And then we tried a better execution. And that the fact that we did that really made us sit up and go, oh, maybe bad mechanics aren't bad. Maybe we just did them badly. And so we do a lot of, sometimes they are bad, but sometimes like the core idea was good, but we executed it badly. And so we can mess up good ideas. Being a good idea doesn't make it a good final end product.
It's like such a challenge though to be able to sort of do like to try to isolate the variable as to why something was successful or why it wasn't successful.
Oh, yes. I mean,
you're iterating constantly, so you have enough of a data set.
I mean, game design is very hard. We do a lot of market research and stuff, but to be honest, a lot of that is all gut. It's not like we can go to the audience and say, why didn't you like Chroma? They don't even know why they didn't like it.
A/B testing.
Yeah. And we don't have A because we're not digital, so we don't have A/B testing. But I mean, I've been doing so. This is in October is my 30th anniversary doing this job, and I've been head designer for like 21 years. 2003, I became a designer. So I mean, one of the reasons I've been doing this forever is I got a good sense of it. Like the reason I was able to take Chrome and turn to Devotion is, I was able to say, okay, what wasn't working, what was working, and once again, I have a very talented team I work with, and so we've gotten really good at making. I mean, in general, the idea of iteration. There's a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and the whole idea of the book is how do you get good at something? And the answer basically is just do it a lot. I mean, 10,000 hours with feedback, I think, is his line. So the one thing about Magic is we've been making Magic for 32 years. I mean, I personally 30 years, but Magic's existed for 32 years, and we have very, very talented people constantly working. We make lots of sets every year. Our iterative reps we got our reps in. We know what we're doing. And so, not that we never make mistakes, we try new things, but we know how to make Magic sets. Why? Because we made a lot of Magic sets. And so, it's one of I think the strategic advantages for us is, hey, we have a game 32 years in with top-notch people who we get, like, one of the things that when I talk about other game designers, one of the things they're jealous of is when I make a set, I know it's coming out. I know the day it's coming out. And a lot of, like, in game design, most things don't come out. Like, I worked on other things while I've been at Wizards, and a lot of it was just, I would work on it for months and it just never came out, or years it would never come out. Mood Swings, I've been working for 20 years, hasn't come out. So a lot of things you make don't necessarily happen. Magic has the luxury of, hey, if I'm working on a Magic set, I know this Magic set's going to come out. It's going to happen. And I know to the day is going to come out because we have a schedule. And so there's something really freeing about making things that I know the public are going to see. And then one of the best parts of my job is we put things out and I get to read the public. And not that there aren't criticisms because it's the internet, but like one of the great things about walking around this show, one of the reasons I love this is this whole week is nothing but like pure positivity. I have had thousands of people stop me and just say to me, this is why Magic is so awesome. I found my friends through Magic. I had a guy who was talking today how he was an alcoholic and like, I just needed something to focus on. And that thing was Magic, and Magic has kept me sober. Endless stories of just, this is how I found my friends, or I got married, or endless stories like that. And that, we're not just making something, we're making something that shapes people's lives, that really impacts them. And that, there's so much positivity out here that it's really like you get on the internet and it is not that. And so it is nice to come here and just actually from the fire hose, and I just say it's the fire hose goodwill, and that it is so amazing to me sort of what Magic can do. I think of it as a force of good, and that in games in general. I mean, I make Magic, but and so that's one of the most awesome things about being at a show like this is, hey, there's 15,000 people having a lot of fun because of work. 17,000 people having a lot of fun because I and my friends, I come up with an idea. Like a lot of the fun of today's talk was, hey, I came up with an idea and I floated it out there, and hey, was doubling season going to be something people liked? I knew I would like it, and it ended up being, really, really popular. And that's that's really fulfilling. It's so much fun to make something and then see the audience just light up, And then not everybody likes everything. That's great, and it's fun to make things that people can argue about. That's all part of the community. But I truly have a dream job. I mean, the reason I've been doing this forever is every way I get to go and make people happy, and I get to be creative, and I get to come up with wild ideas, and that's super fun.
How good are you at Magic?
I am one of the few people in R&D who can say I'm better at Magic than when I started, because most of R&D are from the Pro Tour. Mm-hmm. Like they were the absolute fine tuning of their game, and now they're not quite at that anymore. But I've been playing Magic for 32 years, so I mean and I play against really, really good people all the time, so I'm decent. I mean, I'm not. I don't know if I would qualify for the Pro Tour, but I mean, maybe I could qualify for the Pro Tour. At least it's a chance.
You think you could win an RCQ?
Oh yeah, I could win an RCQ. Yeah. I think there's a chance I could win an RCQ. Limited is my favorite way to play, mostly because I have a family. And, it's like I don't have the time, and so limited is great because I just show up. I don't do any prep work, and I can just play. So limited is my favorite. Like most when I'm playing here this weekend, I'm mostly playing limited. I also like playing what I call design limited, where no one's ever played it before, and you're playing it for the first time. It sometimes goes horribly wrong, but it's very exciting. I love playing a card that I have no idea what the card's like. Like until you test it, you don't know whether something works. Right. So you theory craft it, and then you have your first play test where you play test it for the first time. And there's something I really enjoy about that. Now, it can go horribly off the rails. We play games that are really, really unfun. But there's something I love trying a new mechanic and playing for the first time and seeing what it is. And I'm aware of this, like the audience gets to play fun Magic because we spend a lot of time making sure it's good. Like by the time we print it, okay, this is really good. But it's fun playing that raw, like, who knows? And especially when I love capturing an amazing thing for the first time when you realize you have like lightning in a bottle. That is just, I love when okay, we have something here. That's
a follow-up for the panel.
Yeah.
You told an interesting anecdote about customer service interjecting over the pitch spells and alliances.
Yes.
Any other examples where a department completely outside of the design team and space impacted or tried to impact, but even successfully impacted what ended up coming out?
So one of my favorite, I like telling what I call boulder up the hill stories, where I try to make this thing that we all know is popular. So you can hear the story of me, how hard it was to make. So my absolute favorite one is split cards. So split cards are the cards, for you don't know, instead of having one card of Magic, there's two little tiny cards on it, and you can cast either one. I made them because we made a product called Unglued, which is this wacky thing. We were making a sequel to it, and I got inspired by BFM to make the two little cards, and the product got killed. It got put on hiatus, never to be seen again. But I thought the idea was great. So when we made Invasion, I pitched them to Bill, and the design team was me, Bill, and a guy named Mike Elliott. Bill and I liked them. Mike hated them. Bill and I, and to Richard Garfield, who wasn't working on Magic, Richard liked them. Other than me and Bill and Richard, nobody liked them in the entire, not just the department, nobody in the building liked them. Brand tried to kill them. The development team tried to kill them. And to Bill and I credit, Bill and I spent a lot of time and energy, and eventually they got made. The split cards exist. Came out Invasion. It's wildly popular. But there's a moment in time where the very first development meeting, Henry Stern, the Aerosmith engineer, he was in charge of the set. And the very first thing he said, the very first meeting is, can we just kill these? And I'm like, well, shouldn't we play with them before we kill? And that's the idea that there's something fun for me in the everybody has an opinion, which not in a bad way. Everybody has an opinion. We have lots of sections of the company, and hey, if we're going to do something that is not going to look visually good, I want the art team to tell me. If I'm going to make, I have mechanics I've made that it's not, we can't do mechanically. The art team is like, we have no way to show that. We have no way to demonstrate that in art. And I have to pay attention to that. I have to care if digital can program it. I have to care if we can run tournaments with it. I have to care if we can template. I got to care about that things. And so every department cares because they have a vantage point and they're doing something. And so we get input from all across the company, and that's good. We should. I mean, it's kind of like I used to direct plays. And one of the great things about having actors is the actor only cares about their part. They're not caring about anybody else. And as a director, you care about all these things. And the actor sometimes asks great questions. Like, well, why is my character doing this? Like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. Why are they? You have to think that through. And so I love the fact that the input makes you have to rethink things. And when digital goes, we just can't program this. I'm like, oh, okay. How can I do this? It isn't going to, I have to talk to them and go, okay, well, what exactly is causing you problems? And And that's a big thing. The one major message, maybe that today, I just highlighted the designers in the talk, but Magic is made by thousands of people, and that it is a collaborative design thing. No one person's making anything. It's a lot of people working really hard, very talented people at the top of their game. And it takes us 3 years to make a Magic set. And there are so many moving pieces. On my blog, somebody asked a question once, why you couldn't do something. And the answer was, well, let me explain topography to you, which is I can get 4 L's for 1 M. Like, when I say it doesn't fit, it's because every character has a space to it. And I had to inform them about something they never thought about. Because when you play Magic, you don't got to think about topography, but we have to make the cards, so we got to think about it. And that one of the fun things for me, like on my blog, is like just explaining things to people of, well, we have to do collation, and this means this, or we have to I did a whole podcast once about budgets. I'm like, well, we got a budget, and sometimes I can't do it because we don't have budget for it. And people are like, well, why don't you just ask for more money? Like, no, that's not how business works. Like, you get a budget, you got to meet within your budget. It's just like you can't just add to the budget, And outside of the business world, maybe like when you play Magic, you shouldn't have to care about that. But if you want to know behind the scenes, I got to care about that because I got to fit in my budget, So, but anyway, yeah, like I said, there's lots of give and take, and I find it really fun when talking to the players of letting them see the inside of, hey, this template didn't work or whatever. Like, I love giving those inside stories because a lot of it is like, okay, here's the crunchy bits that maybe you don't know. So, and that's why I love giving talks like this, because there's lots of fun stories of, we had to make things. And
wow. It's like I'm right there again in the windowless room, illuminated by Mark's shining aura. We got a photograph with him after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Sent it to my dad, who I played Magic with. Sent it to my friends from high school who I played Magic with growing up. A lot of people were like, what?
Yeah. I sent it to my dad too, and he was like, who is this texting me right now? How'd you get my number?
Yeah.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah. MagicCon Chicago. We didn't even play, and I think we still had a great time. It was a nice reminder to me to just like, it's okay to go to these things and just kind of explore them without having to grind a bunch of events, go to the dealers, go to the talks. Like I said, the talks were really high quality. I know that there was a Game Nights Live here. If that's your thing, I can only imagine how cool Game Nights Live was in that giant theater for those who celebrate. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Shall we set a goal for the next MagicCon? It's now 2 years in a row of MagicCon Chicago. It feels like this is going to be an annual tradition, like Las Vegas. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Next time they do MagicCon Chicago, I'm going to pull every string I have. We got to get a dive down booth in like the creator area.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fun?
It would be fun to do some kind of event or something like that for sure.
Run a little Dive Down Nation constructed tournament of our choosing.
I think it would be fantastic. Or a limited and constructed. We could have our own pro tour.
Yeah. We form our own custom ban list designed specifically to offend as many people as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. You can only play with cards from the 20 most influential card designs of all time list.
Yeah. It includes lands, so actually doable.
You'd be good to go.
Or at least cards inspired by the list of 20.
No, just these 20.
It's truly like a living card game in that sense.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, 2 conventions in a month, basically. We survived.
Mostly.
But boy, do my arms hurt.
Why? Flying between them? Okay.
Yeah, just flying.
Sure. I'm going to cut that.
No, amplify it. Double it.
Turn it up. I'll put you on top of you there.
Yeah, like a Beatles studio album.
Yeah. Yeah. Surprisingly, that wraps up this week's show, right?
I suppose it does. What should we talk about next week?
That's just between you, me, and Mark Rosewater, I think.
Should I give you a sneak peek of what I'm going to push for?
Sure. Let's hear it.
I think we're due for maybe some kind of cheeky deck dive.
Okay. A cheeky dive.
There's some interesting decks in Modern that we have not tried to pilot, but have talked about.
What is on your mind?
There's some Orzhov decks that I think are pretty cool that are using an important new card from Aether Drift that might be worth discussing. And these Orzhov decks are putting up results. Capital R results.
Yeah, I saw some have Necro Dominance in them now, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm looking at a Modern Challenge from February 23rd that had multiple Orzhov decks in the top 8. A lot of these top 8s have multiple Orzhov decks. I see one that had an Orzhov deck in first and second place.
Shocking.
Maybe the deck can be good.
Maybe Grinding Station or not, Grinding Breach isn't the end all be all.
Well, I think two things can be true.
Yeah. Well, your hate for that deck is well known. But let's get out of here before you
overpromise
offend anyone else. Yeah,
overpromise and then underdeliver a week later.
Exactly.
Because Plan B is doing a revised deck dive into Burn, which is also making a comeback. Not a joke.
What?
Yeah. If you go to the Modern page on Goldfish and do Control F Burn, you get 6 results. 3 of those are from top 8s. One of them is Rakdos. Rakdos Burn came in 3rd place this past weekend in the challenge.
Is there anything interesting in it, or is it just bump in the night? So it's like stuff we're all. Is it 12 lava spikes?
It's Iridescent Vine Lasher in the creature suite.
What?
Yes, and then bump in the night, of course.
Does it have both lava dart or lava spikes? Does it have lava spike in the new one?
It does have Bolt Wave. It even has a one of Forked Bolt. What's that doing here?
Killing Ocelot Prides. That's what it's doing there.
Yeah, and you know what else it has? A one of... Burn has always had a one of Exquisite Firecraft. The fact that it still has Exquisite Firecraft never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah. All right. But what you're saying is that we're going to get back to Modern next week.
Why not?
Why not? It's time.
It's only been a couple weeks since we've talked about it.
It's time.
All right, let's wrap up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. If you'd like to submit a question to the podcast or just reach out in general, we're on Blue Sky, we're on Gmail. You know how to find us. thedivedown@gmail.com is the way to reach us directly. If you want to support our show, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. We also have a store at thedivedown.com/store. We have a handful of wonderful sponsors, including Heavy Play. Promo code thedivedown2025 gets you 10% off your first order at heavyplay.com. Mana Traders, The Dive Down, all one word, gets you 25% cash back after 3 months of service. We have
Magic Mind. If you want to talk about them.
Yeah, I was just trying to find the terms. I haven't committed those to memory. We have Magic Mind. If you head over to magicmind.com/thedivedown or use promo code DIVEDOWN, all one word, it'll get you 48% off your first subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase of my new favorite mental performance shot. And get some physical cards from our friends at Nerd Rage Gaming with promo code DIVE8 for 8% off an order at NRG. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and book a flight to the next MagicCon!